Welcome once again to One Idea Away. This particular episode we recorded on March 25th, and it's part of the Energy Explorer series that we've been conducting in partnership with IPEC. If you have not had the chance to join us for one of these live casts, be sure to follow One Idea Away on Facebook. You can also follow IPEC Coaching, IPEC Coaching on Facebook as well, so that you can see when we are posting out these live discussions so that you can be part of them as they are unfolding, as they are occurring. As you know, one of our goals here is to start the conversation and have you guys be part of it as well as continue it. And so being part of those live casts is a great way to be able to do that. This particular month, we dove in with Minou Hexspoor. And Minou's got a very, very interesting background because she's sort of known as actually the nomad coach because she has traveled the world so extensively. But presently, as part of that work, I should say over the last many, many years, she has lived inside of countries as well as inside of communities that have seen extraordinary hardship. And in the midst of that hardship, how is it that they connect into that idea of resiliency? How is it that they find their center once again? How is it that they get back to places of calm? How is it they wrestle with all of the unrealistic expectations of that we place upon ourselves? And obviously that's highly relevant to the time in which we record this episode. You know, we know that in the background of everything that's going on is the global pandemic that we all face. And this is an episode that talks quite a bit about that in the way in which we can help get ourselves back to our core, back to that center so that we can restabilize. We talk about some very fun things, such as the idea of how we can use practical imagination as part of a little bit of reintroduction to the playfulness of kind of who we are and to settle back into that. We talk very directly about the unrealistic expectations that we do have and how is it that we can kind of grapple them back into reality and really reground ourselves to where things presently are. We even range as far towards the latter part of the interview to talk about what does it mean to be an entrepreneur during these times when there is so much uncertainty, there is so much that seems like it is not stable. What do we do and how do we navigate through this? So there's a wide range of perspectives and a very unique perspective that is shared here by Minou throughout the course of this interview. And so tune in to this episode. Tune into the Energy Explorer live series that we are conducting with IPEC. And you'll be hearing from myself, future guests, as well as even some co-hosts along the way that we'll be turning things over to. So tune in, enjoy, and as always, continue to enjoy the journey. Thank you so much for joining us here in the Energy Explorer series with IPEC. My name is Luke Iorio. For those of you that do not know me, I'm the president of the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, IPEC. I'm also the host of the One Idea Away podcast, one of the other places that you may ultimately access this broadcast and interview through as well. And today, one of the things that we're going to be doing is diving into something we call the Energy Explorer. And so for those of you that have followed IPEC for a little while, one of the things you may know is that the mission of our company, the mission of our institute, is to raise the consciousness of the world one person at a time. And the way that we do that, the framework that we use, the philosophy, the construct that we've been using for over 2 decades now is one that is based on energy, around energy leadership. The reason for that is that consciousness, meaning the way in which we view the world, the lens, the filters, all the experiences that we have ever had that shape the way in which we see, perceive, and interact with the world, that happens to have that consciousness, that awareness happens to have patterns to it. That pattern breaks down into energy and at different levels of energy. And this is one of the things that we talk about. And so we wanted to bring on a series of experts within our coach community to begin to share with you the way in which we are exploring energy. How are they doing it in their own lives? How is it working with their clients? How is it working within their business? And so that was the intent behind why we're putting on this series. So you can get a real inside look at the experiences of what it means to live this way, what it means to work this way, coach this way, and use consciousness within the very construct of all the different things that you're doing. Well, when we put it together, we also did not know that we would be quite in the times that we are experiencing right now either. And I think it's one of the things actually that's pretty interesting is that one of the things we talk about with our clients is that actually it's when you are under significant forms of stress, it's when you are effectively up against it or backed into a corner, that's actually when we start to reveal the most about our energy, about our consciousness. You know, that's the proverbial old phrases of that's when character is really seen. Well, for us, stepping actually beneath where that character comes from is our consciousness and our energy. That's what we're most interested in. And it's at these times of great challenge that we actually begin to uncover what's really always been underneath, so that we can see the conditioning, we can see the beliefs, we can see the perceptions, we can see the way in which we interact with our life and with each other and even with ourselves, because it's those patterns, it's those unconscious patterns that are actually buried within our consciousness, that are within our energy, that have a great deal of effect on the way we make decisions, the way that we communicate, the way that we get to know ourselves, the way that we interact with each other. And it's these times that begins to reveal those to us. So we actually, in that regard, are in a space that allows us to have a very different conversation than we normally would. And as it so happens, we happen to have as our very first interview, Minou Hexspoor. Now, Minou has a wonderful business. She's the Nomad Coach. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. And we wanted to originally highlight just all of this amazing experience that she's had traveling the world, the way that she's created this lifestyle business and all those things. We're going to push a little bit of that aside today, given current events and where we are in the world, because she also has an experience of seeing not just the work that she does with clients, but seeing different cultures around the world, seeing different communities around the world, seeing the different experiences that they have had through hardship and through some pretty extreme times as well. She's seen what it means to be under great duress, not just within those communities, but even with what her clients go through as well. And so she's got some very, very unique perspective, as well as her own personal journey and personal experience that she's going to be able to share with us. So it kind of is just we're in a good place to have this conversation today in the backdrop of these events that are unfolding all around us, and quite literally around all of us right now inside of the world. And so with that, let me officially give you the introduction, the background for Minou. She's recognized as a committed coach and mentor to international leaders who are working in complex conditions and dealing with high stress levels as well as overwhelm. They're looking to create a durable and effective work-life environment that honors their boundaries and priorities. Minou's work with clients focuses on maximizing their ability to lead themselves and others with motivation and inspiration while keeping priorities, team performance, and organizational goals at the forefront. She's a certified coach. She has been trained by the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. She is also an ICF PCC credentialed coach, one of the key credentials that higher level coaches seek inside of this industry. And the work that she does really is about helping her individual clients connect with themselves, to connect with that powerful, authentic, genuine, transparent self, so that they can really, truly connect to the type of lives that they are looking for. And so with that, Minou, I want to thank you so much for being here on the Energy Explorer series.
Thank you, Luke, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely. Minou, I think the first question that I would love to ask you, a deep, penetrating question, but one I think is really critical for everybody right now. How are you doing?
How am I doing? I'm good, and maybe good. Usually I would have all kinds of ideas about what does that mean. But I think today, in the situation we find ourselves in, I think good is actually pretty good. I had a bit, I guess, like all of us, a moment when this all started to come into my life of like, oh my God, this is way bigger than I can kind of like hold in my hands. And I had a bit of a dip because of that, but I think I came out of it more or less and found my way, for so far at least, how to deal with our current realities of confinement here in quarantine in Lebanon. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. I think, for everybody, it's a question that we probably even need to sit with ourselves. And I think, Minou, that's sort of what you just even described is, let's be very honest and transparent with ourselves around how are we doing. And I appreciate you sharing kind of a little bit of the moments that you have been through, right? The energy exploration of getting to good.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what it was. Yes, absolutely.
And I'll be honest. I mean, that's a big piece of what I've also experienced in the last couple of weeks. Is that right now I would say I'm it's similarly I'm in a good space. I will be honest, part of it is because we're here right now doing this. This is one of my favorite things to do, is connect. This isn't just about, an interview or the information we're sharing. This is about connection. And at the same time, that's been one of the things that's been challenged over the course of the last week, the last couple of weeks, right? Is our ability to really connect with each other. And part of connecting with each other begins with connecting with ourselves. And that means we've got to be honest with ourselves. If we're not doing well on a given day, be honest with yourself. That's okay to not have an off day right now.
Absolutely.
And to check in with yourself that way. So I think maybe that's where I do want to begin a little bit, is that part of what you do, even just with clients, and it's part of what you're describing, you've kind of been through, is effectively, how do we get out of that chaos as well as that overwhelm? And so if maybe you could describe a little bit of, because right now you look around, there's tremendous chaos. There's a lot of overwhelm. A lot of that's in the face of uncertainty. And so where does that process begin for you, let alone with clients?
With clients. Well, with myself, like you mentioned earlier, right? That space when something like this happens in our lives, the first thing that probably for a lot of people happens is some sort of response that alternates between fear, anger, worry, all kinds of thoughts that come to our minds. We might think about our loved ones, about our work, about what ourselves, our business. So I think in situations quite unique like we have right now, all our core life areas are somehow one way or the other affected by what is going on. And that for me happened as well. And also for my clients, obviously. But that place where you just, your brain has this, expansion of stuff in it. And you feel like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming and this is a lot. And how do I find a sense of control maybe in so many feelings and thoughts? Because that's what overwhelm is, right? It's either a massive amount of thoughts that your brain is producing, or it's an overwhelm of emotion. I think at the moment we kind of have a combination of both of them. At least from me, that's definitely the case. So I think when we start with that and we find ourselves in that place, and I see that with my clients as well, and in reference to what you asked about how do we respond to that, when a situation changes like this, we tend to really have very high expectations of ourselves. Like, how do I, get my work organized when I'm working from home? How do I deal with the homework of my children? How do I deal with my colleagues? How do I approach how? And that whole pile of expectation just piles on top of us while our brain is still just trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Yeah. Right. So that combination makes even more stress, or creates even more stress in us. And I think one way of really starting to deal with that from a more logical perspective is maybe just acknowledging, like at IPEC and the methodology that we use as IPEC coaches is really the level 3 response, which refers to rational, logical mind, which could really help people right now in just coming one step above that feeling of like, oh my God, how do I handle this? But just starting to feel like, what? How can I manage my here and now, my today, the small things versus all those expectations that we might feel we have to deal with? And just start with, like you said, if your day is going to be okay today, that's just, that's great. If your day is okay. So I think that is a really great starting place for people to actively and practically utilize their practical, logical thinking.
So I want to go into that further in just a second. The first piece, though, that you brought up, or many pieces, but within that first piece that you brought up that I think is really critical, is that when we face uncertainty, when we face the unknown that we're in at the moment, as the exact example, obviously the elephant in the room, we reach for control. Right, that's what a lot of us do. Right, is we want, okay, let's put it all back together again. Let's organize
yes.
this, right? And I think you frame it very well, that all of a sudden we get these unrealistic expectations of, okay, well, I can do this and I expect it to have that effect, and I can do this over here and I'm expecting it to set me up that way for success, or to feel good again, or all of these things that we're trying to control. And of course, one of the challenges in that is that the situation just keeps evolving. And
Yeah.
while we're in a pressure cooker of an experience right now, it's still true anyway. I mean, it's still true in life, that there's always going to be circumstances outside of our control. Life is always going to change. It's always going to evolve in some capacity. Right now, it's just doing it a little more intensely and rapidly than we're used to experiencing, certainly. But we reach for control, and we reach to hold on to those expectations, because those expectations, we believe that that's going to give us control again. Right.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
so if anything to add on to that before I ask you a kind of a follow up on how we begin to put this back together and rationalize it.
Yeah, maybe on the control part, and the feeling of having the combination of expectations and control for a lot of people, and that certainly goes for clients that I work with, but I think for a lot of people at the moment, that life that you so beautifully put together, or complexly put together, whatever you did, suddenly is disrupted, and the expectation is immediately to go back there, because then we think if we can go back to that kind of composure, it is all back to normal. But I think control at the moment might mean just really something else for people, and just start with very practical day-to-day things that are not increasing our level of stress about all things we want to control.
Yeah. So what you brought up in terms of what we refer to as level 3 within the energy self-perception chart, the energy leadership work that we do, has to do with kind of that ability to begin rationalizing, begin making sense of in some way. Now, I want to approach it just a little bit differently, because exactly as you said, with the overwhelm, trying to make sense of things right now is a really, really big task. And so instead, we're looking a little bit smaller than that. One of the ways that we talk about kind of using this part of our awareness is responsibility, meaning the ability to respond. And maybe that's part of where I would love for you to comment, is when you think about your own ability to respond, and you think about the kind of the step at a time approach that you can take, what is it that you're doing, and then what are you helping clients do that have them feel like, you know what, I can set the ball in motion again, and do so in a manner that even if things change, I feel like I'm finding my footing again. So what does that ability to respond look like for you, especially given today's circumstances?
For me personally, the ability to respond, actually, I had quite a realization in this whole situation with myself, which had to do with something that I call practical imagination. I realized that throughout my life, in really complicated, difficult situations, and I think I have a few on my on my stick. So I realized how much I used the power of imagination throughout difficult periods, and I found myself in that reality now as well. That somehow I start using consciously and reminding myself consciously, how can I use imagination to reframe my reality? So the first few days when I was confined to my own house and we can't go out anymore, first it's like, oh shit, how are we going to deal with not going out? And then I sat during lunch with my husband, and I said to myself, you know what, if we're on a spaceship and my house is the suite that I have to live on in that spaceship, that's my space, it's my space, then it's actually not so bad. It's actually really a great place that feels very homey, it feels very comfortable, it's very mine. So that was one way of kind of reducing in the moment my stress. And I started thinking of actually visualizing that. Wow, I'm on a spaceship and this is my suite. This is great. Another thing that I actually started doing actively, also together with my husband, is that every day I choose 1 hour or an hour and a half where I really disconnect from everything that I'm doing during the day and just disappear in a world of imagination. So I'm producing every day a picture that portrays a scene of something that I'm not able to do because I can't leave, but I'm doing it anyway. So some of the viewers or listeners might have actually seen some of those pictures. Yesterday, I had a tea party with my teddy bears on top of the table. On Sunday, I went on a safari trip on my balcony. So that's one way of really practically using my imagination in a way that actually children, they are so skilled in doing this, right? They don't care what's real, what's not real. They just go and they create and they feel happy. So for me, that's one really practical way of dealing with that. With my clients, it is similar.
I gotta hold you right for 1 second. For those of you that just heard that, does not do justice to seeing these pictures, because we talked about, Minou and I talked about this the other day. I went over to her Instagram page. What's your Instagram account?
It's Minou Hexspoor.
Okay, so Minou Hexspoor.
Minou.
Yep. And go check out the pictures, because when seeing you sitting under the big lamp, being at the beach, and then the picture of you at the, doing the explorer, being on safari, all of a sudden puts a total different context to what you just described in place. And the playfulness of what imagination can bring out, it is such an incredible way of shifting our inner state, right? So when we talk about energy, one of the ways of thinking about that is the shift of our inner state. And it creates, right? Now you're having fun, it's playful, you're quite literally making use of this unique circumstance that you find yourself in, and you're doing it in a way that literally lights you up. And so, to me, that practical imagination, that's a wonderful way of describing it. And for everybody, check out some of those pictures, because to me, that brings this to life, this conversation of what practical imagination can look like. And it's a wonderful example of how we can keep ourselves lit up, even at times where it feels like there's a lot of darkness around.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And I think whether that's making pictures during the day or that was my thing, but whatever that is, I think when you allow yourself to step out of that, that adult box that we're in, we're not anymore used to thinking like children. So if you allow yourself one moment, you don't have to do that all day and master this art of shifting your energy in every minute. No, if you can do that one moment in your day consciously by choice. I wake up and the first thing I think now is not like, oh, how am I going to deal with today, or how is this or how is that? No, I think like, what's buzzing in my head about my picture today? And it kind of stays in the background, and it really helps to shifting your feelings, your attention. And I think everybody can find that space inside of themselves where they connect with their playfulness and their, because what is reality really? Like, what is it really like other than how we experience it? So if how we experience reality defines it, then by all means, find a great way of experiencing it and connect with that.
Excellent. So let's chat a little bit about where you were also going to go, which is about working with the clients. And so when you begin working with your clients, they're in that place of overwhelm. You're trying to help them tap into that ability to respond. What then? How does that look? What unfolds from there?
Yes. So I think, unfortunately, for a lot of clients, it's quite a challenge, because that's what I do. I work with people who are working in environments that are stressful. Not only their work, their lives. There's people who work in post-war zones, in disaster zones, in developing countries with all kinds of stuff going on. So their usual circumstances are quite challenging. So then I work with them, right? And they have a great path that they walk, and they feel that that's coming together, and this sense of balance coming to their lives, and that overwhelm is disappearing. And then this happened. So for a lot of people, that was really a hammer on their head, like, oh my God, I did all that work and I put so much growth and energy into reshaping my reality, and now I find myself at the bottom of the pit. For a lot of people, that's really like on top of everything, like really this is the last thing we needed. So what people struggle with is kind of like what I mentioned earlier, these expectation of like, I need to start running as fast as I can right now to get everything, my exercise, my work, my routine, my workspace, my personal space. How do I connect with my friends? How do I take care of the people that I'm responsible for? How? So it goes back to, again, first and foremost, reducing those expectations, and reconnecting with our self-care. Like one thing I always proclaim to everybody, self-care is not something we do after everything is done. Self-care is how we do everything. So I believe that is really a great reminder for people when they feel overwhelmed. How we do things is how we take care of ourselves. So that's one thing that I focus on with my clients, to reconnect with themselves, how they feel positive about themselves, what they would want to feel during a day, not necessarily do, because we have 5,000 things we think we should be doing. But how do you want to feel today? And if you want to feel I want to feel okay today, or I just want to feel a bit relaxed today. Okay, so then let's explore what are the things that you can actually connect with today, that can help you do that. And maybe to give you an example of practice and how practice can play a major role in being able to manifest that in your life. Several years ago, when I was still working in the humanitarian field, we had 1.5 million refugees coming to this country, and we have only 4 million people here. So that's quite a burden and quite a situation for the country to deal with, as well as the enormous stress that people with refugee status were going through. Now, we had a space where children would come together, and one of the things we started doing with children was meditation, but very simple way. We would put on nice music and just simple walk through guided meditation for small children between the age of 4 and, let's say, 10, 12 years old. So that it was just a bit of an experiment, like how can we use meditation in that context? And then what happened one day, we had a bomb explosion not so far away. The Iranian embassy was attacked, and I was at that space with a lot of children. It was a very stressful situation. There was a lot of shouting. It was a few hundred meters away. It was a big explosion. There was panic everywhere. And then one of the facilitators that worked with the children turned on the music that they always turned on when we did that meditation exercise. Wow. And within a minute, or within half a minute, all the children were laying on the floor doing their breathing exercise because they had that cue of, meditation. So it was an amazing example that even under massive amounts of stress, when we practice taking care of ourselves, we can really, really so easily utilize that when we need it. This is a time to practice everything we've learned. Also for coaches, we work with this incredible energy leadership methodology. This is the moment. This is the moment to allow yourself to play and to practice and to say, what is a level 3 response? What does that look like today, here, now, or a level 4 or 5 response? So I think that's really practice. This is the moment. Practice what you've learned in your life.
I love the way you just walked through that, and obviously the impact of the experience there with the children and what you've experienced. And for those who didn't hear us at the top of the call, you're specifically in Lebanon. So the bombing of the embassy that you talk about, this is taking place in Lebanon, and the way that you frame it, and I don't want to lose this for everybody because it's such an important point to underline, bold, italicized type of thing, is the importance of that self-care practice, that connection to self practice. It's something that we do all the time. It's the way we do things, as you said. And one of the things that kind of popped into my head is, as you were describing it, is, an athlete who's going to play in a big game, they don't just jump into the big game. They've been practicing thousands of hours. They practice every single day for the moment that they need it. And I think that's where, we lose track. I love the reminder of self-care doesn't come after everything else is done, because that's so true, right? How many of us are doing that? How many people are listening right now? And it's like, well, yeah, I do my meditation, or I do these, I go for my walk, or I do whatever to reconnect myself. And I do that after I've done the other 100 things on my to-do list, which is why I never get to it. Right. And so we got to reverse this equation, because the self-care is actually what puts the quality of experience into everything else that we do.
Absolutely.
So, God, that visual that to me, I just got this visual of the music going on and the kids one by one starting to lay down and take that time to reconnect. And it's so clear. And exactly as you said they knew that cue of self-care, that cue of the music, and it allowed them to go there when they needed it. Absolutely.
And it was really amazing. Like, you saw all these parents running around in panic, and everybody was panicking. And all these kids, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, were on the floor, breathing, starting their meditation. Like, okay, this is apparently what we do now. It was really amazing. And maybe when you talk about self-care, maybe one thing to add when it comes to things that I really work on also with my clients is, especially now for families who are at home and have a confined space of moving around, what happens to your boundaries and honoring your boundaries? And that also relates to self-care. What conversation do we start with our loved ones around us about respecting each other's space, each other's privacy, each other's, you know what, I'm here, so maybe I need a bit of space. Yeah. So I think a great way also to do that, and that also discuss that with clients, is to have that conversation with family at the dinner table. You know, how do we deal with our own space and our boundaries now that we are all in such a small space?
And you know, and that's it. And again, it's such a at times maybe seemingly obvious, seemingly simple thing, but when we communicate what we need and we communicate our intentions before, and not like in the moment of okay, everybody get away from me, I need my space. Let's set that up a little bit, right? let's
exactly.
have the conversation,
so
right?
Exactly.
Because
now, so instead of saying like, oh my God, you need to stop bothering me, you can just say, you know what, I really appreciate my own space once this moment or that moment, so I can be a better person today.
Absolutely.
So keep it to yourself.
Yep. And so it to me, it removes, I won't say it makes any guarantees. What I will say, because this is so much of what we do, is that coaching is in a way about increasing probability, right? So that there is no guarantee, there is no absolute in this regard. You're not going to get an absolute result no matter what, but you can increase the probability that that result's going to come about, right? And so when we communicate those intentions ahead of time and then we get into a stressful moment, we're increasing the probability that we can turn to a loved one and say, you know what? I can recognize in myself, I need some space at the moment because I need to come back down. I need to recenter myself. Is it okay if I just get some space for that? Totally different conversation, right? Totally different moment.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, what you mentioned here, it reminds me of what we're actually all doing. We're kind of reestablishing a new baseline. Yes. And that new baseline requires communication. I mean, you're a father, you have two teenagers at home. Like, how is that working for you in a new space where you constantly now have to negotiate that in a different way?
You know, it's funny because it's one of the stories that came to mind because you mentioned meditation. I had a moment, maybe it was a little bit towards the beginning of this process, but it was maybe 10 days or so ago. And, you know, I could feel that, you know what, I need time. Thankfully, my family knows that I do carve out very specific time for meditation. It's a critical part of my life. And I said, you know what, I need to, and it was me and my son kind of, you know, getting at each other. And I'm like, you know what, I think I need the space to go meditate. And the thing that was amazing to me in this instance is my son came and meditated with me, which
beautiful.
And so it was a totally different experience. And it's actually, I mean, it's had a lingering effect because of that moment. And so it is knowing how to, exactly as you said, Minou, is setting those moments up, meaning how have we cared for ourselves first? How do we communicate where we're at and what our intentions have been, what we're trying to do for ourselves so nobody misinterprets what we're doing, at least hopefully doesn't misinterpret what we're doing, so that in the moments we need it, we can just have a very, very different experience, a very, very different moment. And so the way that you've described this, I think allows people to see, you know, we're leaving breadcrumbs. We're leaving little stepping stones towards what we're trying to create. There's one other thing that you mentioned. I just wanted to go a little further into this so that nobody missed this one too. When you're working with clients, you mentioned the idea of what is it that you would like to feel or experience today, right? So if you want to feel calm, you want to feel relaxed, you want to, et cetera. And then we figure out how do you do that? I'd love for you to say, right? Because most people don't think that way. It's more of what do I need to get done? And I hope I will feel this way after.
Yes, if I do all these things, then I'm going to feel fantastic.
Exactly. It's almost like I recognize that from a program that you might have taken. But do me a favor and walk through that with everybody, because it's such a key point and it changes so much of our experience.
Yes, it does. And it does for me. Listen, we're all dealing with stress. And so when I do that with clients, and I do it practically as well with myself, I see clients need to vent. They need to get rid of the stress first. So they need to talk and really get their story out. And that's important because, you know, when we're like feeling we're going to explode with stuff and I come like, how do you even feel today? It's like, yo, can you just piss off? Why do you really give me that question? So get for people to get stuff out of this system, I think is incredibly important. But after that, reframing what we believe we need to do, have to do, all these like pressure questions. I try as a coach to really remove those from my language when I speak with my clients and rephrase that to wanting, desiring, what would bring light to your day, what make you happy today, the next hour. If you want to feel good before you have lunch today, what are you going to do? But after we talk about what feeling you would like to experience, because we are so overwhelmed with feeling. And I think we just feel like if I do a lot, then maybe I'll feel good about myself at the end of the day, especially now. So when you ask somebody, what would you like to feel this morning? That takes time for people to think about, like, what I want to feel. I want to feel happy. Really, if I could just feel happy for like an hour before whatever. Okay, and then we explore that. So if you would feel happy for an hour, what would that look like? And then you will come eventually to a doing. And that doing could be something active, but it could also be just, watch Netflix for an hour, whatever it is. But you approach it completely. You approach it from the end goal, which is feeling happy, and then finding out how to get there.
And I think there's this conversation in here as well, that when we approach it this way, listen, there's going to be things that on a given day we've got to get done, whether that's for our family, for ourselves, for work, whatever the case may be. And the way that you're setting it up is that there's going to be times where you realize maybe you can create some space to practice practical imagination or some self-care or whatever it's going to be. And there's also those moments where if you want to have more calm and more peace, let's say, or more happiness and joy inside of your experience today, it can be, how can you bring that into your meeting? How can you bring that into the way that you approach this, right? And so now it gives us that recognition that the quality is going to come from us, and we're going to imbue, we're going to let that quality emerge into whatever it is that we're doing, whether that be something that allows us to get a little space for ourselves and enjoy those moments and truly be present in those moments. Or is it that, today that's just not the reality where I am, but it doesn't mean that I can't bring that into what I'm doing. And then we get these little more, we get a little more of it, a little more of it, a little more of it, the more and more we practice. And then all of a sudden, right? And that becomes then, we're looking for, hey, if we can imbue the stuff that we do 51% of the time with the quality that we want to feel as opposed to the quality that we don't, we're now starting to tip the scales in our favor. And that's, to me, the process you just described is exactly the way we build that muscle of creating that.
Absolutely. And I think, like you mentioned in the beginning, reaction versus response, where do we start responding and where are we still reacting? And I think when we start, and that's where I think that level 3 of that rational perspective can really help when you feel so overwhelmed and stressed. Just start with something. It's okay. It's okay. You're going to get there. It takes time. That's fine too. If it's not good, if it's all crap today, that's also fine. Allow yourself to feel that and acknowledge it for yourself. I really feel bad today. Okay, yeah, that happened. Okay, it's fine. Have a nice moment at one point and take your 5 minutes. And maybe in those 5 minutes, you feel great. And that's good enough for today. Yeah. But reduce that load of, I have to.
That's important, though, is that just even taking that time to feel whatever it is that you're feeling. If it's a crap day, the more that you resist it, the more that you force yourself through it, the more that it's just going to stay with you, as opposed to giving yourself the 5 minutes to just acknowledge that this is how I'm feeling today. And to give yourself that moment, it'll take a little of the edge off. I'm not going to say it's going to go away. Maybe it will, but in other times you get better at this. But as you're starting out, it'll just take the edge off. And that's all we need to do is, right, that little bit of stepping down. It opens up so much space to us as we do so. I know that we're kind of starting to round out, but there's one, I want to pivot just a little bit because you've got a really unique perspective to share. And I actually want to pivot to the business side of kind of what we're doing and what you do, because you've been in exactly as you just alluded to, communities with extraordinary hardship that have gone through major tumultuous times and crisis. And we find ourselves as a world in that experience at this moment, albeit a little bit different because it's health related, not violence related in some instances. But I'm curious, how do you approach your business like at a time of like this? How is it that you step into doing the things that you need to do as an entrepreneur to take care of your business when the world around is experiencing various levels of crisis?
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant question, probably also for a lot of people who are listening, people who run their own businesses. I think first and foremost, what I realized is that what I'm experiencing, a lot of people are experiencing. So I am not alone in that experience. Whether I'm an entrepreneur and somebody else works for a company, from a client or coach perspective, they are still experiencing similar realities at the moment. So I think first and foremost that we can connect through that experience. Now, when it comes more to running a business, I mean, I think we're all facing that. And I'm used to working online, for example. Most of my clients are like in countries where most people don't even want to go on vacation. So I'm used to working online, but for a lot of people, it's a massive challenge to suddenly have to redefine the way they work, the way they network, the way they connect, the way they work direct with people. We are challenged in, and are people still interested? This question that we might have as coaches as well, like, are people interested in this kind of work right now? I can tell you, like, when I worked with refugee communities, if there was one thing that was important in these communities to lift themselves to a different place, it was mindset. It was belief in what they could create. Because the people who lost belief that there was any point to anything, they were the ones that wouldn't make it, or that would really, really suffer so much more. So especially in this time and age, or in this experience, this reality that we are in, that mindset and that resilience and that re-baselining our realities is extremely important. So I would really absolutely calm all the coaches that might feel, what am I doing in this reality? These are the moments where our work is so important. And like you said at the beginning, the mission of IPEC to raise consciousness one person at a time, this is the opportunity and where it's most needed, and where people might feel they don't need it, but that's exactly why it's needed, because we have all these stress responses and reactions. So for me as a business, that's where I try to connect with people, with clients, with organizations, with businesses, on how this reality is affecting their realities and how we can create an opportunity that helps them to navigate that. Yeah. Absolutely. Did that answer your question?
It does, but and I want to point to a few things out to just make some of the connections really, really obvious. And please add to this, Minou. But what I just picked up on is very specifically some of the language that you're using in your answer. And the reason for that is that I don't want people, let me use mindset, even though you didn't use it this way, but I want to kind of show the disparity of what you're talking about versus what other people may assume it to be without having the inner knowledge of this. When we talk about coaching, we talk about working with somebody's mindset, we're not talking about having ultra positivity during times that are really struggling, right? You just said, how do we navigate this new reality? How do we navigate the realities of what we're facing? And how do we, and I think a wonderful word is, how do we have resiliency, and how is our mindset connected to that resiliency so that we can make choices that help us navigate the reality that we find ourselves in? And I think that's a big piece. And the fact that you begin that by recognizing you have some experience with what your clients are going through. And I don't mean past experience. I mean relevant present moment experience. And so that there's a rapport, there's an understanding that is there, and there is not a turning away from reality. There is not putting a positive spin on things. It's quite the opposite. It's looking directly at what we're facing, what we're feeling, what we're struggling with, and saying, okay, that's what is. How are we going to embrace the fact that that's what exists right now? And now what do we do? Now where do we go? How do we begin, exactly as you said, for us personally through this whole call? How is it that we begin to, to build brick by brick back towards where we want to go. And so I think in and of itself, I think is such an important reminder. And the very fact that you bring a context of, as you said, doing this in a variety of countries that have seen, unfortunately, massive struggle for decades. We're not talking a health crisis here. We're talking, they've seen struggles within their communities,
Absolutely,
and their states and their nations for a really long time. And so I just wanted to point out the language you're using, because to me, the language represented the consciousness and the energy behind it. Anyhow, anything to add to that? I really appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe just to feed into that, one concrete thing that I really like to use with clients on this, and that goes back to the methodology of IPEC of 7 levels of leadership, of rewriting the story. So whether that's a life story or it's a small work story, I ask people to rewrite the reality through those different 7 levels of energy that we talk about at IPEC, and who they are being through those different lenses in that reality, in that moment, that meeting or that day or that crisis. And then reconnect with the parts in the different levels that they want to connect with, because they feel that's the most helpful thing to do in that reality. And I think that's a very concrete way of exploring mindset. Like you said, it's not about, just be positive and everything will be fine. No, it's about really getting deep and finding the connection where you can be the best of what you've got to give and what you've got to offer, because that's great and that's really helpful.
The practice you just named of effectively restoring a few things. One, we have a very specific framework of energy leadership that we use for this. For everyone, even just that ability to rewrite your story, your experience of what you're going through at the moment, and write it from multiple perspectives. Let me just say it that way. From this time, if you don't have the background knowledge, it's fine. In writing it from, how am I experiencing it right now? If I was in a more calm state, how would I write this story? If I was my friend who has a different perspective over here, how would he or she write that story? If I were my mentor, my role model, how would they write this story? So that you're beginning to get perspectives. Those different perspectives just literally open up new space and possibility for you to explore. So you're no longer stuck in the single narrative that you find yourself in at this moment. And it's a really, really useful practical practice just at the moment, practical application. And one that I will also add, there's a tremendous amount of research out of positive psychology and everything else as to the effectiveness of this approach. So this is something that has actually been researched, and it was specifically researched around those that were trying to, in some instances, get past trauma, and in other instances, just truly be able to shift through the state that they happen to be in. So there's a tremendous amount of backing with just that one simple approach to start with.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way. Then, do we have time for a quick example?
Please, go ahead.
Like a real life example. I spoke with a client who works actually in the healthcare sector, very challenging at the moment. He had a very, very complicated, stressful day, and I literally took him through those 7 levels, right? And if we make that concrete for people who are not familiar with the methodology, I asked him to look at his day from his perspective, but through 7 lenses. The first one, how did fear play a role today? And if you write your day today down on paper, what is your story of today through the lens of fear? The second question I asked him, would you write your story of today through the lens of anger? How would you write your story today if you would just, rationalize it? It's okay, I managed. How would you write your story? How would you write your story today if you would look at it from how did the helper in you come alive today, the supporter, the carer? How would you write your story today if you would look to the lens of opportunity? What was the opportunities that you saw in today or that you learned that you grew from? The 6th one, how did you experience today? What did that experience bring you today? And the 7th one is more of a state of how can you connect with the calmness in your day, or the creation in your day, the difference. So I think that's a really helpful way. And after that exercise, you can really ask people, what are the parts in rewriting those different stories that you would really want to tap into to utilize tomorrow when you go back to this chaos at work?
Yeah. Excellent. Minou, I absolutely love the example, the exercise for people to be able to walk through if you're tuning in. Great for something for everybody out to just try out and to walk through for yourselves. Let me just ask this. Let's bring it full circle. We are at the end of our interview or conversation here today. And what are any maybe final thoughts, any final words of wisdom, any final reflections that you would love to just pass on to everybody that's tuned in today?
I guess be kind to yourself. Really be kind to yourself. Lower your expectations. You're doing a great job. We're all collectively doing a great job. Connect with your loved ones. Talk with one another. Create your new baseline. Be creative. Be playful. There's a lot to be grateful for. If they're ever going to find out how much we have to be grateful for, it is this time, I think, in our lives. So connect with that gratefulness. Absolutely.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Minou, I want to thank you for being here. Please, for everybody, check out Minou Hexspoor. Exactly that on Instagram, Minou Hexspoor. You're going to find her there. You're going to find her on Facebook. Minou, what's your website?
MinouHexspoor.com.
Even
Mind
easier.
the XS in the middle.
yes. HEXSPOOR.
Yes.
And so I do, everybody please, check out what Minou is up to. Those of you that are out there that have already found IPEC, you can go to ipeccoaching.com to learn more about what we're up to in the world. Certainly something totally different from the programming we do. On our Facebook feed, if that's how you happen to be connecting to us today, we are 5 days a week right now at 11 a.m. We're doing something called Virtual Unity, which is really just connection time for our community, for anybody that's plugged into us, any of the clients of our coaches. It's time where we're sharing grounding, we're sharing meditations, we're sharing stories, we're sharing just connection time. Right now, that's what I'd love to point everybody to, because I think exactly as Minou you just said, is now's a great time for us to really reflect on what matters and what is it that really is truly most important within our lives, and how can we be grateful for those aspects and to really concentrate on them. We had gotten distracted with the busyness of our lives and our world, and right now we are quite literally being brought home again. And so let's use that time, right? And so Minou, I want to thank you for being here. For everybody that was able to tune in this morning or this afternoon or this evening, wherever in the world you happen to be right now. I love the fact that we're global, so we're stretching out all around in those regards. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I want to thank you for being here, for connecting with us. Continue to leave any questions or comments on the feed. We will get to those, and certainly we'll tag Minou if there's anything specifically for her. But thank you for tuning in today on the Energy Explorer series. It's been our honor to be with you. Thank you. Check out IPEC's coach training program at ipeccoaching.com/OIA. And of course, to find out about all the conversations, events, gatherings, all the things that we've got upcoming, then head on over to oneideaaway.com/community. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, please do us the favor of subscribing, reviewing the show, as well as sharing insights or comments that stood out for you in this episode.